Chapter 1, The Scribe of Hollow Vows. The quill scratched against the parchment. A harsh sound. Like small dry bones breaking under pressure. Serah focused on the loop of the L in love, ensuring the ink did not bleed. It was a lie, of course. The couple standing on the other side of her mahogany desk reeked of lust and political convenience, not affection. The male, a bulky gamma from the northern ridge, kept glancing at the clock. The female, petite and shivering despite the heat of the scriptorium, stared at the floor. "Sign here," Serah said. Her voice was flat. A stone skipping over a frozen lake. The gamma snatched the quill. He scrawled a jagged signature that looked more like a claw mark than a name. The bond flared gold for a split second, magic acknowledging the contract, before fading into dull ink. Another sale completed. Another destiny shackled by paper. "Congratulations," she murmured, already reaching for the next blank scroll. They left without a thank you. The door to the street opened, letting in a draft that smelled of wet asphalt and ozone. Serah didn't look up. Survival demanded she remain invisible. In a world governed by fangs and pheromones, being a Null, a wolf with dormant magic and no pack, was a death sentence. Her only shield was this desk. This service. A heavy, iron-tongued bell tolled from the city square. 1, 2, 3 strikes. The sound vibrated through the floorboards, rattling the jar of quills. Serah froze. 3 strikes meant a royal decree. Not a local pack announcement, but a law from the High Council itself. She moved to the window. Outside, the streets of the sector had stopped. Shifters stood like statues, faces turned toward the floating projection screens that hovered above the skyline. The image of the High Elder flickered into existence. His face was a map of wrinkles, eyes milky with age but sharp with malice. "Citizens," the Elder rasped. His voice boomed from the speakers, distorted by static. "The population balance is critical. The Council has ratified the Blood Census." Serah's breath hitched. She gripped the windowsill until her knuckles turned white. "All unclaimed females of breeding age," the voice continued, indifferent and cruel, "must secure a mate within the lunar cycle. Failure to comply will result in state reassignment to the soldier breeding program." The world tilted. Reassignment was a polite word for slavery. It meant being stripped of autonomy, assigned to a barracks, and used until you broke. Serah pressed a hand to her chest. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. She had spent 5 years carefully constructing a life of insignificance. She paid her taxes. She wrote their lies. She stayed quiet. It wasn't enough. Below, in the street, a group of young unmated males turned. Their eyes flashed amber. They were looking at the shop windows. Looking for prey. She stepped back into the shadows of her office. The ink on the desk was still wet. Contracts. She had trusted contracts to keep the chaos of the world at order. But paper could burn. A knock sounded at her door. It wasn't the polite rap of a customer. It was the heavy, authoritative pounding of enforcement. "Serah Vance," a voice boomed from the hallway. "Open up. By order of the Council." Fate had not just knocked. It had kicked the door in. Chapter 2, The Assessment. The council chamber smelled of sandalwood and old blood. It was a scent designed to intimidate, to remind every wolf who entered that predators had ruled here for centuries. Serah stood in the center of the circular room. The floor was polished obsidian, reflecting her own pale face back at her. She looked small. Insignificant. 12 elders sat on the raised dais. They were shadowed silhouettes, judging gods looking down from a high mountain. You understand the situation, Elder Thorn said. He sat in the center. A massive wolf even in human form, his shoulders straining against his velvet robes. I do, Serah replied. She kept her chin high. Fear was a scent they could track. She would not offer it to them. I am a productive member of society. My scribe work generates significant revenue for the sector. Revenue does not produce pups, a female elder to the left sneered. Her voice was sharp glass. Your lineage is muddled, Serah. But your biological markers are viable. We cannot waste a womb on paperwork. The crude reduction of her existence to biology made bile rise in Serah's throat. She swallowed it down. Anger was dangerous here. I have rights, she said. The words tasted like ash. The old laws state. The old laws are suspended, Thorn interrupted. He leaned forward. The light caught the gold rings on his fingers. Trophies from rivals he had killed. The blood census is absolute. You have no pack. You have no mate. You are a resource hoarding itself. I can find a match, she said quickly. Desperation leaked into her tone. I have connections. Give me time. Thorn smiled. It was not a kind expression. It was the baring of teeth before a bite. We are generous, he rumbled. You have 3 days. 3 days. The time limit hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. It was impossible. Courtship in their world took months. Negotiations took weeks. To find a mate in 3 days meant begging. It meant selling herself to the first alpha who would have her. And if I fail? Serah asked. She had to know. She had to hear them say it. Then you belong to the enforcers, Thorn said softly. And they are not known for their gentleness. He waved a hand. A dismissal. Serah turned and walked out. Her legs felt like lead. She could feel their eyes on her back, dissecting her, pricing her. She wasn't a person to them. She was livestock. As she pushed through the heavy oak doors and into the corridor, her mind raced. She needed a loophole. There were no loopholes in the blood census. She needed protection. She needed an alpha who didn't care about the council. Someone powerful enough to tell Thorn to back off, but desperate enough to take a scribe with no dowry. She pulled her coat tighter around her shoulders. The hallway was cold. There was a list in her head. Names of clients she had written bonds for. Men who had looked at her with lingering interest. Most were cruel. Some were old. But she couldn't afford standards. She had to sell her soul to save her body. Chapter 3, The Beggar's Bargain. Rain lashed against the windows of the manor house. A storm had broken over the city, mirroring the chaotic tempest inside Serah's mind. She stood in the drawing room of Alpha Jareth. He was a minor leader, controlling a small territory near the docks. He was also known for his gambling debts. It was her best leverage. Jareth poured himself a drink. Amber liquid sloshed into crystal. He didn't offer her any. Let me understand, Jareth said. He turned, swirling the glass. He was handsome in a rugged, unwashed way. Greasy hair, sharp eyes. You want me to bond with you. Tonight. A contract marriage, Serah corrected. She stood by the fireplace, though no fire burned there. I handle your debts. I manage your estate. My skills as a scribe are lucrative. In exchange, I get your name. I get protection from the census. Jareth took a sip. He looked her up and down. It wasn't a look of desire. It was an appraisal of damaged goods. You're a pretty thing, Serah, he said. In a quiet way. But everyone knows your history. Serah stiffened. My history is irrelevant. Is it? Jareth laughed. A harsh bark of sound. Your mother was a stray. Your father, unknown. You have no scent of power on you. You're a Null. I am efficient, she argued, stepping forward. I can make you rich, Jareth. The council won't touch you if you claim me. He set the glass down. The humor vanished from his face. You think I fear the council? He hissed. I fear weakness. Bonding with you would make me a laughingstock. A Null bride? It would signal that I couldn't attract a true she-wolf. He stepped closer, invading her space. The smell of cheap whiskey and wet dog assaulted her senses. Besides, he sneered, leaning down to whisper in her ear. Why buy the cow when the council is about to give the milk away for free? In 3 days, you'll be in the barracks. Maybe I'll visit you there. It will be cheaper. The insult slapped her harder than a physical blow. Serah recoiled. Her hand went to her throat. You are a pig, she whispered. And you, Jareth countered, are out of time. Get out. She fled. She didn't wait for him to change his mind or decide to take what he wanted right then. She ran out into the storm. The rain soaked her instantly. It plastered her hair to her skull and chilled her to the bone. She stumbled down the cobblestone driveway, gasping for air. Jareth was right. They would all say no. No minor alpha would risk their reputation for a scribe. She needed someone who didn't care about reputation. Someone who existed outside the petty squabbles of the city. She stopped at the edge of the street. Lightning flashed, illuminating the distant, jagged peaks of the Crown territory. The Forbidden Zone. A name surfaced from the depths of her memory. A whisper she had heard clients exchange in fearful tones. The Alpha King. Kael Draven. He was a monster. A recluse. Rumors said he had killed his own pack. That he was cursed. That anyone who entered his domain never returned. He was death. But the breeding camps were a fate worse than death. Serah stared at the distant peaks. The rain mixed with the tears she refused to shed. If she was going to be devoured, she would choose the beast. She turned her back on the city. She turned her back on safety. Tomorrow, she would climb the mountain. Chapter 4, The Boundary of Bone. The air grew thinner with every step Serah took up the mountain path. Here, the wind did not just blow. It bit. It chewed through her coat and gnawed at the skin beneath. The Crown territory was not merely a location on a map. It was a graveyard of ambition. Twisted black trees clawed at the gray sky like skeletal fingers begging for mercy. There were no birds here. No squirrels. Only the silence of a held breath before a scream. Serah adjusted the strap of her satchel. It contained her ink, her quills, and the blank scroll that would determine her future. Her legs burned. Lactic acid flooded her muscles, demanding she stop, demanding she turn back to the city where slavery awaited. She forced her left foot forward. Then the right. A sudden pressure dropped on the mountain. It wasn't atmospheric. It was biological. A weight on the back of her neck, primal and heavy. The air grew charged with the scent of ozone and crushed iron. He was here. Serah stopped. To run was to trigger the chase instinct. To cower was to invite contempt. She stood her ground on the narrow ridge, surrounded by mist and jagged rock. "You have a death wish, little scribe." The voice seemed to come from the stones themselves. Low. Resonant. It vibrated in her chest cavity. A shadow detached itself from the tree line. Kael Draven. The Alpha King. He was larger than the stories claimed. He stood well over 6 feet, broad shoulders filling out a dark, tattered coat that looked like it had seen centuries of war. His hair was black ink spilling over his collar. But it was his eyes that froze her blood. They were not the warm amber of a normal wolf. They were silver. Cold, polished steel that reflected nothing but her own terror. "I have a proposition," Serah said. Her voice shook, betraying her. She cursed herself internally. Kael moved. He did not walk. He blurred. 1 second he was 10 yards away, the next he was towering over her. The heat radiating from him was a furnace. It clashed with the freezing mountain air, creating steam that curled around them like living tendrils. "Trespassers are eaten," Kael stated. He tilted his head, sniffing the air near her throat. "You smell like ink and desperation. You are a Null." "Why would a sheep wander into the wolf's den?" "Because the sheep is being hunted by the shepherd," she retorted. The words slipped out before she could check them. Something flickered in those silver eyes. Surprise? Amusement? It was gone too fast to track. "The census," he deduced. His lip curled, revealing the flash of a white fang. "The council culls the weak today." "So you came to the exile. You think I am a savior?" "I think you are a businessman," Serah countered, her hand tightening on her bag. "And I have currency you cannot find in these ruins." Kael laughed. It was a terrifying sound, devoid of joy. "I have no need of coin. Or company." He turned his back on her. "Dismissal." "I can break the isolation spell on your library," she shouted. He stopped. The wind howled, filling the silence. Serah pressed her advantage. "I know the script. I know the old dialect. You have books you cannot read. History you cannot access. I can unlock them." Kael looked back over his shoulder. The hunger in his gaze shifted from physical to intellectual. He studied her, dissecting her utility. "Follow," he commanded. "If you fall behind, I leave you to the frost." Chapter 5: The Midnight Bell. The interior of the fortress was a mausoleum of lost glory. Dust motes danced in shafts of gray light that pierced through the crumbling stone roof. The temperature inside was barely warmer than the storm outside. Kael led her through a labyrinth of corridors lined with tapestries that had rotted into ribbons. Serah struggled to keep pace. Her lungs burned. Her boots dragged on the stone floor. They entered a massive hall that must have once hosted feasts for hundreds. Now, it held only a single, heavy wooden table and a throne made of black iron. A sharp chime echoed from her pocket. Serah froze. She reached into her coat and pulled out her scribe's slate. The glass surface pulsed with a red light. A notification. Update: Census Enforcement Protocol accelerated. Deadline revised, midnight tonight. The device slipped from her numb fingers. It clattered loudly against the stone floor. Midnight. She didn't have 3 days. She didn't even have tomorrow. She had hours. Bad news? Kael asked. He was lounging on the iron throne, one leg draped over the armrest, watching her with detached curiosity. They moved the deadline, Serah whispered. The blood drained from her face. Tonight. If I am not bonded by midnight, the trackers will activate. They will find me. She looked up at him. The distance between them felt like an ocean. I cannot go back down the mountain. I won't make it in time to find another. Then you are dead, Kael said simply. He picked up a silver goblet from the floor and inspected it. Or enslaved. The difference is negligible. No. The denial ripped from her throat. Serah marched toward the throne. Fear burned away, replaced by the cold clarity of the doomed. She had walked through a blizzard. She had faced the monster. She would not lose to a clock. You need a scribe, she stated, her voice echoing in the vast hall. And you need a buffer. The council is encroaching on your territory. They test your borders daily. A wife, a legal mate, grants you sovereignty protections under the Accords of 1922. They cannot invade the land of a bonded pair without a declaration of war. Kael lowered the goblet. His gaze sharpened. You know the law better than the elders. I wrote half of it, she lied. She had transcribed it, which was close enough. Marry me. On paper. I organize your archives. I secure your borders legally. You give me your name. We never touch. We never speak unless necessary. When the census laws are repealed, and they will be, history always cycles, we annul it. Kael stood up. He descended the dais steps, the sound of his boots heavy and rhythmic. Thud. 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 He circled her. A predator inspecting a trap. You offer me a shield made of paper, he murmured. And in exchange, I give you the protection of my blood. It is a fair trade. Serah held her breath. Her heart hammered against her ribs so hard she feared he could hear it. It is a dangerous one, Kael corrected. He stopped in front of her. He was close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his chest. You are a Null. My energy is volatile. A bond could kill you. Let me worry about my survival, she said. Just sign the paper. He stared at her for a long moment. Then, a slow, dark smile spread across his face. Write it. Chapter 6, The Ink of Souls. The library table was cleared of debris. Serah's hands did not shake. They were steady with the muscle memory of 1,000 contracts. She mixed the ink, adding a drop of the binding agent she always carried, a solution of silver nitrate and crushed sage. The quill moved swiftly across the parchment. Legal terms flowed from her mind to the page. Asset protection. Sovereign immunity. Dissolution clauses. She constructed a fortress of words to keep them safe. To keep them separate. Kael watched from the shadows. He had not spoken since giving the command. His presence was a heavy blanket in the room, suffocating and electric. Done, Serah announced. She turned the scroll toward him. Sign at the bottom. The magic will verify the intent. No ceremony required. Kael stepped into the light. He took the quill. His hand was large, scarring crossing his knuckles. He didn't read the terms. He looked at her. Once this is done, he warned, his voice a low rumble, you belong to the Crown territory. There is no leaving. I have nowhere else to go, she replied. Kael pressed the quill to the parchment. He signed his name with a flourish of aggression. Kael Draven. The ink flashed gold. The standard reaction. Serah exhaled. Now I sign. She took the quill. Her fingers brushed against his. A shockwave blasted through the room. It wasn't a static spark. It was a thunderclap. The windows of the library shattered outward, raining glass into the storm. Serah gasped, dropping the quill. A line of fire raced up her arm, searing into her veins. It wasn't pain. It was absolute, terrifying power. The scroll on the table didn't just glow. It ignited. But the paper didn't burn. The flames turned blue, then violet, swirling upward to form a double helix of light. Kael roared. He grabbed his chest, staggering back. His eyes shifted. The steel gray vanished, swallowed by a deep, glowing crimson. "What did you do?" he snarled. His voice was no longer human. It was dual-toned, the man and the wolf speaking in unison. I don't know." Serah backed away, clutching her burning arm. On her wrist, where there had been nothing a moment ago, a mark was forming. A black intricate knot that pulsed with the beat of Kael's heart. This wasn't a legal contract. This wasn't a business arrangement. The magic in the room swirled faster, a vortex of ancient energy that smelled of rain and sandalwood. It wrapped around them, binding them tighter than chains. Kael looked at her. The crimson in his eyes swirled with shock. He bared his teeth, fighting for control. "You are not a Null," he growled. The realization hit Serah with the force of a physical blow. The bond had not just accepted the signature. It had awakened something dormant in her blood. She looked at the mark on her wrist. Then at the monster she had just shackled herself to. "I think," she whispered, the room spinning around her, "we made a mistake." The clock struck midnight. The bond snapped into place, locking them together. There was no annulment clause for this. Chapter 7, The Gilded Target. Morning light did not bring warmth to the Crown territory. It brought exposure. Serah stood before a tall mirror in the guest quarters, staring at a stranger. The silk dress was heavy, woven with threads of silver and midnight blue, the colors of House Draven. It was armor disguised as luxury. She raised her hand. The mark on her wrist was no longer a burning wound. It was a tattoo of ink and magic, a complex knot that seemed to writhe under her skin whenever Kael was near. The door opened. Kael did not knock. He filled the frame, dressed in formal ceremonial leathers. The scent of pine and rainstorm flooded the room, overpowering the lavender soap she had used to scrub the ink stains from her fingers. "The council emissaries have arrived," Kael stated. His voice was a flat line. "They are here to verify the bond." Serah turned. "Let them look. The contract holds." "The paper is irrelevant now," he countered, stepping into the room. The temperature seemed to drop 5 degrees. "They are not looking for a signature, Serah. They are looking for a weakness. You are a Null scribe who suddenly wears the mark of the Alpha King. To them, you are an anomaly. A target." He reached out. His fingers, rough and calloused, brushed her neck. Serah flinched. The contact sent a jolt of electricity down her spine, a biological response she could not control. "Stay close to me," Kael ordered. "Do not speak unless spoken to. Do not show fear. If they smell it, they will tear you apart before I can stop them." They descended the grand staircase together. The main hall, empty the night before, was now occupied. 5 figures in gray cloaks waited near the entrance. The council enforcers. Leading them was an alpha Serah recognized from the news feeds. Commander Rylan. A wolf known for his efficiency and lack of mercy. Rylan watched them approach. His eyes flicked to the mark on Serah's wrist, then up to Kael's face. "We received the registry update," Rylan said. His voice was smooth oil. "We assumed it was a clerical error." "The Exile King made it to a scribe?" "The law is satisfied," Kael rumbled. He placed a hand on the small of Serah's back. The weight of it was grounding, a heavy anchor in a storm. "Leave my land." Rylan smiled. It did not reach his eyes. "The law requires a physical inspection of the bond, Your Majesty." "To ensure no coercion was involved." The commander took a step forward, entering Serah's personal space. He inhaled deeply, testing her scent. "She smells of fear," Rylan noted softly. "She smells of me," Kael snarled. The growl vibrated through Serah's chest. The air in the hall thickened, heavy with the pressure of a dominant aura. Rylan stepped back, his survival instinct overriding his arrogance. "Very well," the commander conceded. "The council acknowledges the union. But be warned, Draven. A mate makes you vulnerable. History remembers what happened to your last pack." The enforcers turned and left. The heavy doors boomed shut, sealing out the light. Serah let out a breath she had been holding. Her knees felt like water. She leaned against the banister for support. "They hate you," she whispered. "They fear me," Kael corrected. He removed his hand from her back. The absence of his touch left a cold spot on her spine. "Now they will hate you too. Welcome to the throne, my wife." Chapter 8, The Law of the Jaw. The training grounds were a slab of granite carved into the side of the mountain. Wind whipped Serah's hair across her face, blinding her. She pushed the strands back, glaring at the man standing 10 paces away. Again, Kael commanded. "I am a scribe," Serah snapped. "I fight with words. I negotiate. I do not posture." "You are a target," Kael returned. He paced the perimeter of the circle, his movements predatory and fluid. "Words do not stop a throat rip. In this court, respect is not given. It is taken. When an alpha challenges you, you do not look down. You do not explain. You hold the gaze until they break. And if they don't break, then I kill them." The casual way he mentioned murder made her stomach turn. This was the monster the city whispered about. The brute. Yet, under the violence, she sensed a desperate structure. He was not teaching her cruelty. He was teaching her survival. "I have an invitation," Serah said, changing the tactic. She pulled a heavy cream envelope from her pocket. "The solstice banquet. Tonight. The council expects us." Kael stopped pacing. He stared at the invitation. "It is a trap. It is a social obligation," she argued. "If we hide, we look weak. If we go, we prove the bond is real. We prove I am not a prisoner." "You are a prisoner," he muttered, though the bite was gone from his tone. "I am your partner," Serah corrected. She stepped forward, closing the distance. "You protect my body. Let me protect your reputation. I know these people, Kael. I wrote their marriage contracts. I know who cheats, who steals, who lies. I have ammunition." He looked at her then, really looked at her. The crimson in his eyes had settled into a simmering gray. There was a begrudging respect there. "Wear the black dress," he said finally. "And do not leave my side." The banquet hall in the city center was a riot of noise and perfume. Chandeliers dripped crystal tears from the ceiling. The elite of the shifter world mingled, holding champagne flutes and sharpening their verbal knives. When Serah and Kael entered, the room went silent. The music stopped. Conversations died. All eyes turned to the exiled king and his Null bride. Serah lifted her chin. She remembered the lesson on the mountain. Hold the gaze. She locked eyes with the nearest alpha female, a haughty woman in red silk. The woman looked away first. They moved through the crowd. A path cleared for them, fear parting the sea of bodies. Then, a shadow blocked their way. Alpha Vane. A massive, scarred brute who controlled the eastern shipping lanes. He had been one of the men Serah had considered asking for help 3 days ago. He had laughed at her then. He wasn't laughing now. Well, Vane slurred. He smelled of brandy and aggression. The scribe found a stray dog to take her in. "Tell me, Draven, does she bore you yet? Or is she just a warm body for the winter?" The insult hung in the air, toxic and heavy. The room held its breath. Serah opened her mouth to retort, to use the sharp wit that was her trade. Kael's hand shot out. Chapter 9, The Crimson Stain. It happened faster than thought. Kael did not shift. He did not growl. He simply moved with the terrifying efficiency of a guillotine. His hand clamped around Vane's throat, lifting the 300-pound alpha off the floor as if he were made of straw. Vane clawed at Kael's arm. His boots scrabbled against the marble. "You speak to my queen," Kael said. His voice was soft. Intimate. "You speak with respect. Or you do not speak again." Vane gurgled, his face turning a mottled purple. His eyes bulged, pleading for the council guards to intervene. But the guards stood frozen. No one interfered with an alpha challenge. "Kael," Serah whispered. She placed a hand on his bicep. The muscle under the suit jacket was rock hard. "He isn't worth it." Kael didn't look at her. His gaze was fixed on Vane. "He insulted you. That makes him a corpse." With a sickening crunch, Kael tightened his grip. Vane went limp. Kael dropped the body. It hit the floor with a heavy, wet thud. The silence in the ballroom was absolute. Guests stared in horror. This was not a duel. This was an execution. Kael took a handkerchief from his pocket. He wiped his hand, his expression bored. "The banquet is over," he announced. He took Serah's elbow and guided her toward the exit. The crowd parted instantly, terrifyingly fast. They were ghosts walking through a field of statues. They didn't speak until they were in the sleek black car, speeding back toward the mountain. Serah stared at his hands. They were clean. No blood. Just the memory of violence. "Why?" she asked. Her voice trembled. "Because they needed to see," Kael replied. He stared out the window at the passing city lights. "They needed to know the price of touching you." He shifted in his seat. A grimace of pain flashed across his face. "You're hurt," Serah noticed. "It is nothing. Let me see." She didn't wait for permission. She reached over and pulled back his jacket. The shirt underneath was soaked in red. Vane had managed one desperate scratch. 3 deep claw marks tore across Kael's ribs. The wounds were steaming, his accelerated healing fighting a losing battle against some poison on Vane's claws. Wolfsbane, Serah realized, the scent hitting her. He coated his nails. Drive faster, Kael ordered the automated system. His head fell back against the headrest. His skin was turning gray. Serah pressed her hands against the wound, trying to staunch the flow. Her scribe's hands, usually stained with ink, were now coated in the thick, hot lifeblood of a king. "Stay with me," she ordered. The fear she had felt earlier vanished, replaced by a fierce, protective panic. Kael turned his head. His eyes were half open, glazed with pain. He looked at her not as a possession, but as a lifeline. "You chose poorly," he wheezed. "Be quiet," she commanded. "I am rewriting this contract. You don't get to die on me." The car sped into the dark, carrying the monster and the scribe toward the only safety they had left. Each other. Chapter 10, The Shadow Council. The smell of wolfsbane still lingered in the fabric of Kael's coat. It was a faint, acrid scent that sat beneath the heavy musk of his cologne. To the casual observer, the Alpha King stood tall and imperious in the center of the council chamber. Only Serah noticed the microscopic tremor in his left hand. Only she saw the way his weight favored his right leg, protecting the claw wounds on his ribs that were knitting together too slowly. They had been summoned to answer for the death of Alpha Vane. "You violated the truce of bread and salt," Elder Thorn announced. His voice boomed from the dais, echoing off the cold stone walls. "To kill a guest is a crime against our oldest traditions." "He was not a guest," Serah interjected. Her voice was clear, cutting through the murmurs of the gathered gallery. She stepped forward, placing herself physically between the council and her husband. "He was an assailant. Under Section 4, Paragraph 2 of the Accords, an alpha has the right to eliminate any immediate threat to his mate. Vane's claws were coated in poison. That is premeditated assassination, not a duel." Thorn narrowed his eyes. The light from the high windows caught the dust motes dancing in the air, freezing the moment in a tableau of tension. "Proof," the elder demanded. "The toxicology report is on your slate," she replied, pointing to the device in front of him. "I filed it 3 minutes ago." Kael remained silent. He watched her. His silver eyes held a strange mixture of pride and terror. He was used to being the shield. He did not know how to be the guarded. A ripple of movement caught Serah's attention. To the right of the dais, a minor clerk was fumbling with a ventilation seal. It was a small action. Insignificant. But scribes were creatures of detail. The clerk was sweating. His pulse was visible in his neck. The air in the room shifted. A subtle hiss of gas began to leak from the vent. "Down!" Serah screamed. She didn't think. She tackled Kael. The collision sent shockwaves of pain through his injured ribs, but the force drove them both to the floor behind the heavy oak witness table. A projectile shattered the spot where Kael's head had been a second before. A glass vial exploded against the stone, releasing a cloud of purple smoke. Panic erupted. The gallery screamed. Enforcers drew weapons. "It's a neurotoxin," Serah yelled, pressing her face into Kael's chest to filter the air. "Don't breathe." Kael didn't panic. He moved with the lethality of a cornered beast. He kicked the heavy table over, creating a barricade. His hand found the back of her neck, holding her tight against him. "You saw him," Kael rasped, his voice rough with suppressed pain. "How did you see him?" "I watched the hands," she whispered into his shirt. "Everyone watches the king. No one watches the servants." The chaos above them was a symphony of violence, but in the small dark space behind the table, there was only the erratic thudding of two hearts sinking into one rhythm. He was the target. But she was the eyes. Chapter 11, The Fracture in the Soul. The safe house was a cabin buried deep in the timberline, far from the prying eyes of the court. Rain hammered against the roof, a relentless drumbeat that matched the throbbing in Serah's temples. She moved around the small kitchen, boiling water and crushing dried herbs. Kael sat on the edge of the bed. His shirt was off. The bandages on his side were soaked through with dark blood. The toxin had slowed his healing factor to a crawl. "This will sting," Serah warned. She dipped a cloth into the hot herbal mixture. She pressed it against the wound. Kael hissed, his muscles seizing under her hands. His skin was burning hot, a fever raging beneath the surface. Serah worked with efficiency, but her fingers trembled. Seeing him vulnerable, this titan of a man reduced to mortal fragility, terrified her more than the assassin had. "Why did you do it?" Kael asked. His voice was thick, delirious. "You should have run." "I don't run," she murmured, cleaning the jagged edges of the claw marks. "We have a contract. Remember?" He reached out. His hand gripped her wrist, right over the mark that bound them. The contact was electric. A jolt of pure energy surged up her arm, bypassing the pain, bypassing logic. It was a pull so strong it made her knees weak. Kael's eyes locked onto hers. The silver was swirling, darkening into that dangerous crimson she had seen in the library. But this time, it wasn't anger. It was hunger. He pulled her closer. Serah didn't resist. She leaned in, drawn by a gravity she couldn't name. Her lips parted. She wanted him to kiss her. She wanted to forget the politics, the poison, the fear. "Serah," he groaned. The sound was a plea. He leaned forward. His breath ghosted over her lips. Then he screamed. He shoved her away with enough force that she stumbled back against the wall. Kael doubled over, clutching his head. He roared, a sound of agony that shook the cabin's foundations. "Get out!" he bellowed. "Kael?" Serah reached for him. "Don't touch me!" He looked up. His face was contorted, veins bulging black against his skin. "The curse, it isn't just a story." He scrambled backward, putting the bed between them. He was shaking violently. "The Draven curse," he gasped, fighting for every word. "It doesn't just make us strong. It breaks the mind. If I mate, if I love, the beast takes the wheel. Permanently." Serah froze. The realization hit her like a bucket of ice water. "You mean you go feral?" "I mean I cease to exist," Kael whispered. The crimson in his eyes was receding, leaving behind a hollow, haunted gray. "If I give in to this bond, Serah, I will not be your husband. I will be a monster that knows only how to feed. I will kill you." Love was not the salvation. Love was the trigger. Chapter 12, The Origin of Ash. Serah sat alone in the corner of the cabin. Kael had passed out hours ago, the fever finally breaking, leaving him in a restless, sweat-soaked sleep. She could not sleep. Her mind was a kaleidoscope of broken glass, each shard reflecting a piece of the puzzle that didn't fit. The bond shouldn't have activated. She was a Null. Nulls had no magical signature to trigger a mating cycle. Why had the library exploded? Why had the ink burned blue? She opened her scribe's satchel. At the bottom, hidden beneath stacks of standard legal forms, was a book she had stolen from the council archives years ago. It was a genealogy of the first families. She had never dared to look up her own lineage, fearing the blank space where her father's name should be. Tonight, fear was a luxury she could not afford. She lit a small candle. The flame flickered, casting long, dancing shadows against the log walls. Serah turned the pages. The parchment was brittle, smelling of dust and time. She found the entry for her mother. Serah Vance. Beta. Unmated. She traced the line down. Offspring, Serah. Status, Null. But there was a footnote. A small symbol drawn in the margin next to her name. It wasn't a wolf pack sigil. It was a circle with a line through it. The alchemical symbol for catalyst. She cross-referenced the symbol with the index of forbidden magic. The catalyst bloodline, a recessive strain believed extinct. Females of this line do not possess their own magic. They amplify the magic of others. They are the breakers of curses. They are the end of kings. Serah covered her mouth to stifle a gasp. She wasn't a Null because she lacked power. She was a Null because she was a mirror. She reflected power back at its source, magnified 1,000 times. That was why the bond had been so violent. She was amplifying Kael's curse. She looked at the sleeping man. His chest rose and fell in a ragged rhythm. He believed his own darkness was the danger. He didn't know the truth. She was the gasoline. He was the match. The council wasn't hunting her for the census. They were hunting her because she was the only thing capable of burning their world down. If she stayed, she would turn him into a monster. If she loved him, she would destroy him. She closed the book. The decision settled in her chest, heavy and cold as a stone. She had to break the bond. Not to save herself, but to save him. Chapter 13, The Anatomy of a Lie. The apothecary in the lower district smelled of sulfur and dried lizard skin. It was a place where desperate wolves went to buy illegal suppressants or poisons to handle rivals. Serah pulled her hood lower. The fabric scratched against her cheek. She was not here for poison in the traditional sense. She was here for a severance agent. Nightshade root, she whispered to the merchant. An ash from a burnt willow. The merchant, a stooped badger shifter with milky eyes, paused. His hands hovered over the jars. Those ingredients were not for healing. They were for killing a magical connection. Specifically, they were used to numb the spiritual pathways between bonded mates. That is a dangerous cocktail, the merchant rasped. He placed the items on the counter wrapped in brown paper. It does not just break a bond. It burns the nerve endings. The pain will be absolute. I am paying for the goods, not the lecture, Serah replied. She slid a heavy pouch of gold across the scarred wood. She took the package and turned to leave. Her heart beat a frantic rhythm against her ribs. Thump. 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 This was the only way. Kael believed the curse would consume him if he loved her. She knew the truth was far worse. As a catalyst, she was a living amplifier. Every moment they stayed connected, she was feeding his beast, making it stronger, pushing him closer to the feral edge. She had to cut the cord. If she could numb the bond temporarily, she could leave the territory without triggering his tracking instinct. She would disappear. He would hate her for abandoning him. That hate would save his life. Serah stepped out into the alley. The rain had returned, washing the grime of the city into the gutters. She clutched the package to her chest. A shadow detached itself from the brick wall. Shopping for gardening supplies, my queen? Serah froze. She recognized the voice. It was greasy. Smug. Beta Larkin, the right hand of the alpha she and Kael had humiliated at the banquet. Larkin stepped into the dim light. He held up a small device. A recording crystal. It glowed with a faint blue light. Nightshade and Willow, Larkin mused. The council will be very interested to know why the Alpha King's new bride is buying ingredients used to murder a mate's mind. It isn't what you think, Serah said. Her voice was steady, but her blood ran cold. It is exactly what I think, Larkin sneered. You are a fraud. A Null who tricked a king. And now that you have his protection, you plan to poison him and take the throne. He didn't know about the catalyst blood. He thought she was just a common Black Widow. Give me the crystal, Serah commanded. She stepped forward. Larkin laughed. No. I think I will keep it. The council meets in an hour. I suspect they will want to see this. He turned and ran. Serah lunged, but he was a wolf. He was faster. He vanished into the labyrinth of the city, carrying the evidence that would paint her as a traitor. She stood alone in the rain. The water soaked through her cloak. Perfect. It wasn't the plan she had made, but it was the result she needed. If the council accused her of treason, Kael would be forced to reject her. He would have to cast her out to maintain his authority. She would be exiled. And he would be safe. Chapter 14, The Cage of Public Opinion. The Grand Rotunda was designed to make the accused feel small. The ceiling soared 100 feet high, painted with frescoes of the first pack-hunting demons. Serah stood in the center of the pit. The circular rows of stone benches were packed. Every clan leader, every elder, every minor dignitary was there. Kael sat on the high throne overlooking the pit. He wore his crown. It was a jagged band of iron that looked painful to wear. His face was a mask of granite. He did not look at her. Serah Draven, Elder Thorn announced. His voice was amplified by the acoustics of the room. You are accused of high treason. Conspiracy to commit regicide. A murmur ran through the crowd. It sounded like a swarm of angry hornets. The evidence is irrefutable, Thorn continued. He gestured to the center of the room. A holographic projection sprang to life. It showed Serah in the alley. It played the audio of her purchasing the nightshade. I have no defense, Serah said clearly. The silence that followed was heavy. Thick. Kael shifted on the throne. The movement was slight, but Serah felt it through the bond. Confusion. Anger. Betrayal. You admit it? Thorn asked. He leaned forward, his eyes gleaming with triumph. You admit you sought to poison the king? I sought to end the bond, Serah lied. She kept her eyes on the floor. She could not look at Kael. If she looked at him, she would break. I am a scribe. I belong in the city. I never wanted the mountain. I never wanted the beast. She forced the words out. They tasted like bile. I wanted to weaken him so I could escape. The crowd erupted. Shouts of traitor and witch rained down on her. She confesses. Larkin shouted from the front row. She is a parasite. She used our king and now she seeks to cripple him. Thorn raised his hand. The room quieted instantly. The punishment for attempted severing of a royal bond is death, Thorn declared. However, given her status as a Null, perhaps a life sentence in the breeding camps is more useful. Serah squeezed her eyes shut. This was it. Kael would have to agree. He couldn't protect a wife who admitted to trying to harm him. He would denounce her. The bond would snap. He would live. Does the king have words? Thorn asked, looking up at the throne. Serah braced herself for his rejection. She waited for the anger. She waited for the severance. She is lying, Kael said. His voice was not a shout. It was a low rumble that vibrated through the floorboards. Serah's head snapped up. Kael was standing. He descended the stairs of the dais. He didn't stop at the edge. He walked into the pit. He walked until he stood directly in front of her. Kael, don't, she whispered. Let me go. You are a terrible liar, Serah, he said softly. He reached out and took her hand. He pulled her close, pressing her palm against his chest, right over his heart. You didn't buy the nightshade to kill me. You bought it because you think you are saving me. He turned to face the council. He still held her hand. He gripped it like a weapon. Chapter 15, The Red Declaration. The ingredients were purchased on my orders, Kael announced. The lie hung in the air, bold and impossible. Thorn sputtered. Your orders? You ordered your own poisoning? I ordered a suppressant, Kael improvised smoothly. My wolf is agitated. The queen was assisting me in managing the transition. She took the blame to protect my image. A foolish act of loyalty. He looked at Serah. His eyes were burning with a fierce, terrifying intelligence. He had seen through her sacrifice. And he had thrown it back in her face. She is not a traitor, Kael roared, his voice rising to fill the dome. She is my mate. And she is under my protection. This is absurd. Larkin yelled. We have the recording. She said she wanted to escape. Couples quarrel, Kael dismissed. It is a private matter. Thorn stood up. His face was purple with rage. He saw his victory slipping away. He saw the Alpha King standing united with the anomaly. You cannot dismiss this, Draven, Thorn hissed. The law of succession is clear. A king who cannot control his house cannot control the realm. There is doubt here. There is weakness. There is no weakness, Kael growled. The air around him began to distort. The heat was rising again. Then prove it, Thorn challenged. A cruel smile twisted his lips. If she is truly your mate, and not a liability you are covering for, then she can stand beside you in the old way. The room went deadly silent. Even the air seemed to stop moving. We invoke the blood trial, Thorn declared. Serah gasped. The blood trial was a myth. A barbaric relic from the pre-city era. It required the bonded pair to survive the arena against the council's champions. It was a death sentence. No pair had survived it in 200 years because it required absolute synchronization. You ask for a slaughter, Kael said. His voice was dangerous. Low. She is a scribe. She is not a warrior. If she is worthy of the Alpha King, she must be both, Thorn countered. Refuse, and you forfeit the crown. You forfeit your life. And hers. Kael looked at Serah. The weight of the world was in his gaze. He could walk away. He could annul the marriage right now and save himself. We accept, Kael said. No. Serah grabbed his arm. Kael, you can't. You will go feral in the arena. The violence, the blood, it will trigger the curse. Then we burn together, Kael whispered. He kissed her forehead. It was a seal. A promise. I would rather die fighting for you than live without you. Thorn banged his staff on the floor. So be it. At dawn, the gates open. Prepare your souls. The guards moved in to escort them to the holding cells. Not the royal suite. The cells. They were no longer king and queen. They were gladiators. Serah looked at the man walking beside her. He had chosen death over safety. He had chosen her. The question of worthiness was answered. Now, only the question of survival remained. Chapter 16, The Glass Heart. The dungeon beneath the arena smelled of rust and centuries of fear. Water dripped from the stone ceiling, marking time like a slow, torture device. Serah stood by the iron gate. She could hear the roar of the crowd above. They were chanting for blood. They were chanting for the end of the Alpha King. Kael stood behind her. He was checking the straps on his leather armor. His movements were precise. Calm. He was a soldier preparing for his final war. He was ready to die for her. That was the problem. If they walked into that arena together, her catalyst blood would feed his curse. The violence would trigger the feral state. He would slaughter the champions. Then he would slaughter the crowd. And finally, his mind would shatter, leaving him a beast forever. She could not let him become a monster to save her. Kael, she said. Her voice was steady. Cold. It had to be cold. He looked up. A small, brave smile touched his lips. Do not be afraid, Serah. I will not let them touch you. You don't understand, she replied, turning to face him. She locked her trembling hands behind her back. I am not afraid of them. I am afraid of you. The smile vanished. What? I read the archives, she lied, twisting the truth into a dagger. I know about the curse. I know what happens when you lose control. You are a ticking bomb, Kael. And I will not be the collateral damage. He stepped forward, reaching for her. Serah, the bond. She stepped back. The bond is a mistake. I told you in the courtroom. I wanted to escape. I wanted the money and the status. I never signed up to be mated to a rabid dog. The insult landed like a physical blow. Kael flinched. The light in his silver eyes flickered. You are lying, he whispered. I feel you. I feel your heart. You feel what you want to feel, she snapped. I am a Null. I have no magic. I have no heart for you to feel. It was all an act. Every touch. Every kiss. An act to survive. She grabbed the bars of the gate. She shouted to the guards outside. Open the gate! I invoke the right of severance. I reject this mate. The guard outside froze. The chanting above seemed to dim. Kael stared at her. His face went slack. The crimson in his eyes didn't flare with anger. It died. It faded into a dull, lifeless gray. He looked at her as if she had just shoved a knife into his chest. You reject me? I reject you, she stated, forcing her voice to remain flat. I reject your name. I reject your blood. I reject your bond. The magic in the room screamed. It wasn't a sound. It was a pressure change. The mark on her wrist flared with white-hot agony, then turned black. It seared the skin, burning the knot away. Kael doubled over. He gasped, clutching his chest. The connection between them, that warm, living thread of gold, snapped. It was gone. The silence that followed was louder than the screaming crowd. Chapter 17, The King of Ruin. The heavy iron gates groaned open. But only one figure walked out into the blinding sunlight of the arena sand. Kael Draven walked alone. He did not walk like a king. He walked like a ghost. His shoulders were slumped. His eyes were fixed on the dirt. He dragged his sword behind him, the metal scraping against the stone with a sound like a dying breath. The crowd went silent. They had been promised a duo. A romantic tragedy. Instead, they got a broken man. Elder Thorn stood in the Imperial box. He looked down, confused. Where is the female? She has invoked severance, the guard captain shouted from the tunnel. She has renounced the bond. A gasp rippled through the stadium. Laughter followed. Cruel, mocking laughter. The Alpha King, the monster of the mountain, had been dumped by a scribe moments before his death. Thorn smiled. It was a reptilian stretching of lips. Then the trial is forfeit. A king without a queen is no king at all. He gestured to the champions waiting in the center of the ring. 3 massive alphas, armed with axes and chains. Finish him, Thorn commanded. The champions charged. The ground shook with their weight. Kael did not raise his sword. He stood there. He looked up at the sky. He looked numb. The fire that had driven him, the protective instinct that had made him lethal, was gone. Serah had extinguished it. The first alpha reached him. A massive axe swung for Kael's head. Kael didn't dodge. He simply leaned to the side. The blade sliced through his shoulder, biting deep into the muscle. Blood sprayed across the sand. Bright red. Mortal. He didn't make a sound. He looked at the wound with detachment. As if it belonged to someone else. Fight, someone screamed from the crowd. But Kael wouldn't fight. He dropped his sword. It clattered to the dust. He fell to his knees. Not from the wound. From the weight of the emptiness inside him. He bowed his head, exposing his neck to the executioner. He was waiting for it. He wanted it. Thorn raised a hand, stopping the champions. Stop, the elder barked. Death is too easy. Look at him. He is not a threat. He is a husk. Thorn's voice amplified over the speakers. Let it be known. Kael Draven is unfit to rule. He is stripped of his lands. He is stripped of his title. He is exiled from civilized society. Let him live with his shame. The champions laughed. They kicked dirt into Kael's face. Kael didn't move. He remained on his knees in the blood and dust, a king crowned in failure. Chapter 18, The Echo of Silence. The city was celebrating. Fireworks exploded over the skyline, painting the night in bursts of green and gold. The tyrant was gone. The council had won. Serah sat in her old office. The scriptorium. It was exactly as she had left it. The smell of ink. The stacks of parchment. The dust motes dancing in the light of the street lamp outside. It was the safety she had craved. It was the life she had fought to keep. It felt like a coffin. She looked at her wrist. The skin was raw and red, scarred where the mark had been burned away. It throbbed with a phantom ache. An amputation of the soul. I saved him, she whispered to the empty room. She repeated the words. She needed them to be true. I saved him. He didn't go feral. He is alive. But was he? She had seen the footage on the news feeds. She had seen him on his knees. She had seen the look in his eyes before the camera cut away. It wasn't life. It was just existence. She had saved his body by murdering his heart. A knock sounded at the door. It was faint. Hesitant. Serah stood up. Hope, wild and irrational, flared in her chest. Kael? She rushed to the door. She threw it open. The street was empty. Just the rain. Just the wind blowing trash along the gutter. And a single object lying on the doormat. She picked it up. It was a quill. A black feather quill, stripped from a mountain hawk. It was the quill she had used to sign the marriage contract in his library. He had kept it. And now he had returned it. It was a message clearer than any letter. The contract is void. You are free. Serah gripped the quill until it snapped in her hand. The sharp sound echoed in the quiet street. She wasn't free. She was hollow. She realized then the fatal flaw in her logic. She had believed that love was a weakness. That it made you vulnerable. She had believed she could protect him by removing herself from the equation. She was wrong. Love wasn't the curse. Fear was the curse. Her fear had done exactly what the council wanted. It had destroyed him from the inside out. No, she hissed. She looked toward the distant mountains. The Crown territory was dark. No lights flickered in the fortress. He wouldn't go back there. He was in exile now. He would go to the wilds. To the places where beasts went to die alone. Serah turned back into her shop. She grabbed her cloak. She grabbed her satchel. She didn't pack ink this time. She packed a knife. She packed a map. She had spent her whole life writing stories for other people. She had spent her whole life running from the ending. It was time to write her own. She stepped out into the rain. She didn't look back at the safety of the city. She looked toward the dark, dangerous horizon. She was going to find her husband. And she was going to make him take her back. Chapter 19, The Alchemist's Cipher. The wilds were not a place, they were a mouth. A gaping, frozen maw of ancient pines and wind that stripped the heat from Serah's bones within hours of crossing the perimeter. She huddled beneath the overhang of a weeping rock face, shielding the stolen genealogy tome from the sleet. Her fingers were blue. Numb. Yet she turned the brittle pages with the feverish intensity of a madwoman. She had been wrong. The thought had nagged her since she left the city, a splinter in her mind she couldn't extract. Why had the library bond turned violent? If she was merely a magnifier of his curse, why had the magic felt offended? It hadn't just amplified, it had recoiled. She found the footnote again. The symbol next to her mother's name. In the dim light of her lantern, she traced the ink. A circle with a slash. She had read it as null. As void. But the light hit the parchment at a slant, revealing an indentation in the paper. A ghost of a second stroke, faded by time. It wasn't a slash. It was a bridge. It was the alchemical symbol for amalgamation. Her breath hitched, turning to white mist in the freezing air. She translated the old tongue text beneath it, words she had skimmed over in her panic before. The beast devours the cage. The beast obeys the key. The realization hit her with the force of a physical blow. The Draven curse wasn't a sentence to madness. It was a defense mechanism against control. The magic went feral because she had tried to bind it with a contract. She had tried to cage a god with paper and ink. The explosion in the library hadn't been the curse rejecting her blood, it was the curse rejecting her lie. It wanted truth, she whispered to the wind. The beast didn't need a keeper. It needed a partner. It needed a choice made without coercion, without fear, without the safety net of a prenuptial agreement. She slammed the book shut. She hadn't saved Kael by leaving. She had abandoned him to the one thing his wolf couldn't survive, rejection. She had confirmed his deepest fear, that he was unlovable. And in doing so, she had pushed him toward the very madness she sought to prevent. Serah stood up. Her legs screamed in protest, muscles tight with cold. She didn't care. She checked the tracking compass in her pocket. The needle was spinning wild, confused by the magnetic anomalies of the wilds. But she didn't need the compass. She closed her eyes. She stopped thinking like a scribe and started feeling like a wife. She reached out into the void, searching for the frayed, burnt end of the tether she had severed. It was faint. A pulse in the dark. A heartbeat buried under snow. There. North. Deep in the dead valley. She dropped the heavy book. She didn't need history anymore. She needed the future. Serah tightened her scarf and began to run. Chapter 20, The Wolf in the Snow. The valley was a graveyard of silence. No birds sang here. The wind dared not howl. In the center of a frozen lake, a massive shape lay curled in the snow. It looked like a boulder of black granite, dusted with white powder. But boulders didn't bleed. Serah skidded down the embankment, her boots sliding on the ice. She fell, scrambling back up, her breath tearing at her throat. Kael! The shape moved. A massive head lifted. It wasn't a man. It was the wolf. He was colossal, a creature of nightmare and shadow, his fur matted with dried blood from the arena wounds. He didn't shift. He didn't recognize her. A low, subterranean growl vibrated through the ice beneath her feet. It was a warning. Come no closer. Serah didn't stop. She walked onto the lake. The ice cracked ominously under her boots. Crack. I know you can hear me, she called out. Her voice was thin against the vastness of the valley. I know you think I left because I was afraid of what you are. The wolf snarled. He rose to his feet, towering over her. His eyes were not crimson. They were black. Deeply, terrifyingly empty. He was fading. The man was already gone, only the instinct to kill remained. He lunged. It was a feint. A test. Jaws snapped inches from her face, hot breath smelling of copper and despair washing over her. Serah didn't flinch. She didn't reach for a weapon. She didn't pull out a contract. She stepped into his space. I wasn't afraid of the monster, she said, her voice trembling not with fear, but with grief. I was afraid of the man. I was afraid that if I loved you, and you destroyed me, I would have nothing left. She raised her hand. The wolf froze. He was waiting for a strike. A spell. She placed her palm flat against his wet, matted snout. I lied, she whispered. Tears froze on her cheeks. I don't want to escape. I don't want safety. I want the storm. The black eyes widened. A flicker of silver sparked in the darkness. I choose you, she declared. Not for the crown. Not for the protection. I choose Kael. She pressed her forehead against his fur. Come back to me. The reaction was instantaneous. The ice beneath them didn't break. It sang. A harmonic resonance that hummed through the valley. The blackness in the wolf's eyes shattered like glass, replaced by a blinding, brilliant silver. Heat exploded from him. Not the burning fire of the library, but a warm, golden light that enveloped them both. The snow around them melted instantly, turning the frozen lake into a pool of steam. The massive body shrank, bones rearranging with a wet crunch. Fur receded into skin. And then, Kael was there. Naked. Shivering. Human. He fell into her arms, his weight dragging them both to the wet ice. He buried his face in her neck, inhaling sharply. You came back, he rasped. His voice was broken glass. I never left, Serah promised, holding him tight. I just had to learn how to stay. Chapter 21, The Obsidian Gate. The council guards posted at the northern gate were bored. They were playing cards, betting on how long the exile king would last in the wilds before the cold took him. 3 days, the sergeant laughed. He was bleeding out when he left. I give him 3 days. I'll take the under, a rookie said. He wanted to die. A man with no will freezes faster. A heavy thud interrupted the wager. The ground vibrated. A rhythmic impact. Boom. 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 The sergeant stood up, squinting into the morning fog that clung to the road leading from the mountains. What is that? A silhouette emerged from the mist. 2 silhouettes. They walked in step. Kael Draven wore no crown. He wore tattered leather scavenged from the wilds. His chest was bare, exposing the fresh, pink scar where the arena axe had bitten him. But he did not look broken. He looked forged. Beside him walked the Null. The scribe. Her coat was muddy, her hair a tangled mess of wind knots. But her head was high. And on her wrist, visible even from the walls, a new mark glowed. It wasn't a black knot. It was a band of liquid gold, bright as the sun. Alert the elders, the sergeant screamed, fumbling for his radio. He's back! The gates were reinforced steel, designed to withstand a siege. Kael didn't draw a weapon. He didn't shout. He simply looked at the barrier. Serah placed her hand in his. She squeezed. Together, she asked. Always, Kael replied. He raised his free hand. He didn't push. He pulled. The air pressure dropped. The steel of the massive gates groaned. Rivets popped like gunfire. The metal warped, twisting inward as if crushed by an invisible giant hand. With a deafening screech, the gates were torn from their hinges and tossed aside like parchment. The path to the city lay open. Kael lowered his hand. He looked at the terrified guards, his eyes burning with the calm, terrifying authority of a king who had conquered his own hell. Tell Thorn, Kael said, his voice carrying over the wreckage without effort. School is in session. And we have some amendments to make. They walked through the ruin of the gates, hand in hand, stepping over the threshold of the old world and into the war for the new one. Chapter 22, The Apex of the Blood. The doors to the grand rotunda did not open, they disintegrated. Wood splinters rained down on the assembled council like confetti at a funeral. Kael stepped through the ruin first. He didn't look like a ragged exile anymore. The power rolling off him was a physical wave, heavy and suffocating, tasting of ozone and ancient iron. He walked with the terrifying grace of a predator who had forgotten the concept of mercy. Serah walked beside him. She wore no armor. She carried no weapon. Yet, every eye in the chamber was drawn to her. The gold band on her wrist pulsed in time with the heartbeat of the room. She was the eye of the hurricane, the calm center around which the violence revolved. Elder Thorn stood on the dais. His face was a mask of disbelief that cracked into fury. "Seize them!" Thorn screamed. Spittle flew from his lips. "They are abominations. Kill the beast. Capture the witch." The royal guards hesitated. Their instincts were screaming at them. A beta does not attack an alpha prime. A wolf does not bite the hand of a god. But training was a powerful shackle. With a collective shout, 12 armored enforcers drew their shock batons and charged. Kael didn't raise his fists. He turned his head slightly towards Serah. "Shall we?" he asked. Loudly, she replied. Serah reached out. She didn't tap into her own magic, she had none. She reached into the bond. She grabbed the roaring furnace of Kael's power and acted as the prism. She focused it. She amplified it. She screamed, but not with her voice. She screamed with her soul. "Kneel." The command hit the room like a tactical nuke. It wasn't a suggestion. It was a biological imperative rewriting the nervous system of every shifter in the hall. The air pressure dropped instantly, shattering the windows high in the dome. The charging guards didn't just stop. They collapsed. Their knees hit the stone floor with bone-jarring impact. Weapons clattered away. They pressed their foreheads to the ground, whining in submission, overwhelmed by an alpha aura magnified 1,000 times by a catalyst lens. Thorn gripped the podium. His knuckles were white. He fought the command, his veins bulging, his nose bleeding from the pressure. "This is tyranny," the elder gasped. Kael ascended the stairs. He moved slowly. Inexorably. He stopped in front of the shaking elder. "No," Kael said. His voice was a low rumble that vibrated in the marrow of everyone present. "Tyranny is forcing a population to breed like livestock. Tyranny is a census of blood. This?" He looked at Serah, who stood at the base of the steps, glowing with the residual energy of their union. "This is evolution," Kael finished. He placed a hand on Thorn's chest. He didn't push. He simply released a fraction of the raw, unfiltered dominance he had held back for years. Thorn's eyes rolled back. The elder crumbled, sliding down the front of the podium to pile in a heap of velvet robes and defeated ambition. He wasn't dead. He was simply rendered obsolete. The room was silent save for the ragged breathing of the bowed council. Serah walked up the steps. She didn't look at the unconscious elder. She looked at the empty seat of the High Council. She turned to face the room. The golden light on her skin began to fade, settling into a hum of constant, thrumming power. "The session is called to order," she announced. Chapter 23, The Paper Pyre. The silence in the rotunda was brittle. It was the quiet of a forest after a wildfire, where the old growth has burned away to leave the soil exposed and raw. Serah stood behind the massive oak desk that had served as the altar of their oppression for 2 centuries. She looked at the ledger open before her. The Blood Census registry. It contained names. Thousands of them. Women categorized by fertility markers. Men ranked by aggression indices. It was a book of breeding stock disguised as governance. Kael stood at her right hand. He was the sword that kept the wolves at bay, his silver eyes scanning the prostrate forms of the remaining elders who dared not lift their heads. "What is your will, my queen?" Kael asked. The title wasn't a formality. It was a definition. "Bring me a torch," Serah commanded. A tremor went through the room. Beta Larkin, the sniveling opportunist who had tried to frame her, crawled forward. He held a ceremonial brazier lamp, his hands shaking so badly the oil sloshed over the sides. "Mercy," Larkin whimpered, offering the flame. "We only followed the law." "The law is ink," Serah said cold and sharp. "And ink can be blotted out." She took the lamp. She didn't hesitate. She tipped the burning oil onto the open ledger. The dry parchment caught instantly. Orange flames licked up the pages, consuming the names, the numbers, the calculated misery of their society. The fire spread to the stack of marriage mandates. It leaped to the taxation scrolls. Thick black smoke rose to the shattered dome, carrying the ash of the old world out into the night sky. From this moment, Serah declared, her voice ringing off the stone walls, the census is dissolved. No wolf will be claimed against their will. No bond will be forced by the state. You will marry for power, or for love, or for nothing at all. But you will choose. She looked at the cowering council members. "Stand up," she ordered. They scrambled to their feet, terrified, looking to Kael for permission. Kael nodded once. "You have governed by fear," Serah continued, watching the fire turn the registry to gray dust. "You assumed that without chains, we would devour each other. You were wrong. The chains were what made us vicious." She stepped around the burning desk. She walked to the edge of the dais. "Go back to your territories. Tell your packs that the Draven curse is broken. Tell them that the Alpha King has returned. And tell them that if anyone tries to write a law that enslaves another soul, the scribe will come for them." She held up her hand. The gold band on her wrist flared one last time, a warning beacon visible to every pair of eyes in the room. "And next time," Kael added, his voice dark with promise, "we won't bring a torch. We will be the fire." The council members fled. They ran like frightened children, scrambling over each other to escape the heat of the burning laws and the judgment of the new monarchs. Serah watched them go. The adrenaline that had sustained her began to ebb, leaving her knees weak. She swayed. Kael was there instantly. His arm went around her waist, holding her up, taking her weight. "It is done," he murmured into her hair. "No," Serah replied, watching the embers glow on the stone floor. "We just cleared the table. Now we have to write something new." Chapter 24, The Unwritten Page. The balcony of the scriptorium offered a view of the entire city. Dawn was breaking over the skyline, painting the bruised clouds in shades of lavender and tangerine. The rain had finally stopped. The air smelled clean, scrubbed of the smog and fear that had choked the streets for weeks. Serah leaned against the iron railing. She held a mug of tea, the ceramic warm against her palms. She wore one of Kael's shirts. It was too big, swallowing her frame, but she liked the weight of it. It felt like a claim. The door behind her opened. Kael stepped out. He moved quietly for a man of his size, his bare feet making no sound on the wet concrete. He wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on the top of her head. He didn't speak for a long time. He just held her, breathing in the scent of morning and survival. "They are calling you the Golden Queen," he said softly. The rumble of his chest against her back was a comfort she would never tire of. "The news feeds are already rewriting history. They say we planned this from the start. A master strategy to purge the corruption." Serah laughed. It was a tired, happy sound. Let them write their stories. We know the truth. We were just two drowning people who learned to swim. Kael turned her around. His hands rested on her hips, his thumbs tracing the curve of her waist. The silver in his eyes was calm now. A mirror reflecting the sunrise. I was prepared to die in that arena, he admitted. I had made peace with it. I thought it was the only way to keep you safe. You were an idiot, Serah said affectionately. She reached up and traced the line of his jaw. You thought love was a transaction. You thought you had to pay for it with your life. And you? Kael asked. He caught her hand and kissed the palm, right over the lifeline. What did you think? I thought I was unworthy, she whispered. I thought because fate never chose me, I had no right to choose for myself. I thought I had to be invisible to survive. She looked past him, at the city waking up below. A city where young wolves were waking up free from the fear of a midnight knock at the door. I don't want to be invisible anymore, she said. Kael leaned down. His forehead rested against hers. You could never be invisible, Serah. Even when you were hiding in this shop, covered in ink, you were the loudest thing in my world. He kissed her then. It wasn't the desperate, frantic kiss of the cabin, nor the tragic kiss of the dungeon. It was slow. Deliberate. It tasted of tea and hope. What happens now? He asked, pulling back slightly. We have a kingdom to run. A council to rebuild. 1,000 enemies waiting for us to slip. Serah smiled. She pulled a fresh quill from the pocket of his shirt, one she had placed there earlier. She twirled it between her fingers. Now, she said, looking at the blank horizon that stretched out before them. Now we do the work. We make mistakes. We fight. We love. She tossed the quill over the balcony. They watched it spiral down, catching the light, drifting toward the street below. We stop following the script, Serah concluded, pulling him back toward the warmth of the room. And we start improvising. The sun cleared the horizon, flooding the balcony with gold. The night was over. The story was just beginning.